Hello everyone, my name's Dawn and I live in rural Cyprus, as you saw from the introduction, totally off-grid, and this is one of my channels, Tranquility Through Life's Natural Beauty. Do go and check out my other channel, New Beginnings, My Everyday Life in Rural Cyprus. And we've got lots coming up today. We're focusing more today about rural off-grid life and also how we used to live, which a lot of those concepts are in my frugal off-grid life. So I'm sure quite a lot of you are adapting to old ways, whether it just be household tips and hacks or whether you are going back to basics in your life. People complain about not having enough money, but of course, this was a huge concept of living in the past. So we're going to cover that in two respects today. I'm going to be doing another edition of story time today, and that is reading about life in the past, a true story, and we're going to be reading another chapter of that. And also I'm going to be showing you as my Friday film footage today of how extreme my frugal living off-grid life became when it was the pandemic. So I'll show you that and then I'll talk about that afterwards. So bear in mind, this was during the pandemic, and as I say, I'll talk about it afterwards, but bear in mind that's when the video was made. And then we'll talk about any changes. Of course, we're going to do the usual things today, including quiz time. So we're going to do quiz time as well. So stay tuned for that. And of course, question of the day. And I think the question of the day will be related to our main topic of the day as well. So let's start first of all with the film clip I told you I'm going to share with you, which was my frugal off-grid life, which I still have, and maybe we'll talk afterwards about changes or not after this film was made. We already use the local spring for our drinking water, but now we had to save even more money, so we decided to stop paying for diesel to run our generator to bring our water up from our borehole, and instead use a free spring water for everything. So we needed to find a way that we could transport the water from the local spring, but without using our car to haul great amounts of water. So Mike made this from an old water tank ladder and some old lawnmower wheels. Really well now.
Yeah, I know, I can see the flames up the top here.
So, looking at that myself, I would say 99% of that is exactly the same. Yes, so it's not about pandemic and lockdown, it is the way we now live. So, what are the differences? Well, first of all, we don't go and get water from the spring at all, and I have talked on my main channel about that. The water cannot be used anymore. There's plenty there, but somebody has used an old abandoned building, made a home in there, and their sewerage goes straight into the spring. Now that is being looked at by the government, but it's been a long time, so we cannot use spring water anymore. So that is a big difference, and it's affected us because we now buy bottled water. Yes, we could use water from our borehole, but that's 650 foot down, and we have to legally get that tested I think it's every month, and pay money for that. So it's cheaper for us to buy. When I say bottled water, I'm talking the great big industrial size water containers, which I also grow in. So that is an expense to us, but cheaper than using our own water. Of course, the water from our borehole we use for everything else. Now, to say that we don't have water, and we've had situations, water in the garden, that actually reoccurred very recently. Again, I talked about it on my main channel, New Beginnings, My Everyday Life in Rural Cyprus. And you will hear that what happened there was the borehole, we pump water up. We have a generator for the pump to pump up the water, which some goes onto the water tank on the top of our house, and some goes into a huge irrigation tank to water our land. The irrigation tank actually started to have leaks and big problems. It's very old, and we have earthquakes which possibly caused the damage. And as we were trying to raise funds to get that fixed, because we couldn't water the garden, our borehole pump broke, And so we had no water at all to water the garden. Of course, I wasn't then going to go and use the spring again because it's technically contaminated and I don't want that on food I'm going to eat. We do have other ways that we manage other issues and situations that go on. And as I say, full story is in my other channel. So go and take a look there. If you want any URLs to those situations, please ask me in the comments. If you say I want to see more about that, tell me what specifically, and I will give you the links to the actual videos on those. Oh, and I must apologise for the start of that video where it wasn't queued up for you. I completely forgot. So that's why you had a little delay at the beginning. So let's go on to that. As I say, everything else is basically the same, if not even more frugal, because I don't have an income. So neither of us work, and so we have to live by our means. As you see, there was the rental that we charge minimal amount on so that we get someone that always stays in our property. They get more value than moving on to something else, or they'd have to move to something much smaller. So we do have that. Okay, let's go on to this. So my question of the day is this: what is the most frugal thing you do in your life, whether it was a one-time thing or it's something you do all the time, like recycling or going to salvage dumps and seeing what you can find, not spending money at all? I'd like to know more about that. If that is your answer, what is the most frugal thing you do or have done? And I'd be so interested in that. And obviously, if you've got a channel and that is one of your key things, subjects of your channel, please tell me that in your comments under this live, and I will most definitely come there. And I want to see people who've got some different ideas to what I do on my main channel. I find that very hard to find. So if that's you, come and say hello on my comments and let me know that I need to check out your channel. Okay, let's move along. So before I continue with our story time about life in the past, a true story, let's get our quiz underway. So I'll read all the quiz questions first, and then I'll go back and do the answers. Today is the subject of art and painting. Art and painting. So let's have a look at these questions. The first question is, what part of an egg was used by prehistoric cave painters? What part of an egg was used by prehistoric cave painters? You got pretty much 1 out of 3 chance of getting the answer right there. And some of you going, 3? Can't even think of 3 parts of an egg. Okay, next question is, can you name either of the colours that were often used by the ancient Greeks to decorate their pottery? Can you name either of the colours? There's 2, so you can go for both colours if you're very good. Name either of the colours that were often used by the ancient Greeks to decorate their pottery. Think of the old pottery and you'll see the colours in your mind. The next question is, do artists painting frescoes have to work slowly or quickly? Do artists painting frescoes have to work slowly or quickly? The next question, does tempera or oil paint produce richer colours? So oil paint or tempera. produce richer colours. The next one is, did Michelangelo paint a fresco on the doors, the walls, or the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel? Did Michelangelo paint a fresco on the doors, the walls, or the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel? And the next question, from what was Michelangelo's sculpture of Moses carved? So what item did Michelangelo carve the sculpture of Moses? See if you know the answer to that one. The next question, does oil paint or tempera paint dry more slowly? So which dries more slowly? And the last question for today, what part of an egg was used to make tempera paints? What part of an egg was used to make tempera paints? So while you're having a little think, and before I do the answers, let's do today's quote corner. Impossible. I'm possible. Spelt the same. I'm possible. Nothing is impossible. Okay, let's go through the answers to today's quiz on art and painting. The first question was, what part of an egg was used by prehistoric cave painters? Did you get the answer right? The answer is the white of the egg. The next question was, can you name either of the colours that were often used by the ancient Greeks to decorate their pottery? And you could have answered red or black. If you think of the pictures of the old Greek pottery, mostly they were black. So if you said black and red, then you can get 2 points. The next question was, do artists painting frescoes have to work slowly or quickly? And the answer is quickly. The next question, does tempera or oil paint produce richer colours? And the answer is oil paint. The next one was, did Michelangelo paint a fresco on doors, walls, or ceilings of the Sistine Chapel? I'm sure you got this one right. The answer is, of course, the ceiling. The next question was, from what was Michelangelo's sculpture of Moses carved? Did you know this one? The answer is marble. The answer is marble. Go and Google that and you'll see. The next question was, does oil paint or tempera paint dry more slowly? So which one dries more slowly? And the answer is oil paint. And the last question is, what part of an egg was used to make tempera paints? And the answer is the yolk. The yolk. So how did you do on art and painting? We have done a different version of art and painting before. I wonder if you did better this time. Okay, so let's now go on to this. So this is my book that I've been reading to you by Eileen Whiting, which is Growing Up in England in a place called Wallington. Now, there is more than one place in England called Wallington. This is South London, Surrey. Surrey is Wallington, and I actually had 2 homes there. So I'm very interested in reading this, and there's lots of pictures I've been sharing with you. So this is real life living in the past in part of England. And this section today I'm going to read you is about manners and customs. Oh, a lot of that's gone out the window these days, has it not? So it goes. The suburban city of outer London when I was young was an unbelievably enclosed and exclusive one. There was a fine degree of snobbishness as regards to which road you live in. I believe that's still relevant today. Also to which school you attended, what your father did for a living. Factory work was non-existent in our immediate area, and practically every father travelled daily to the city to an office job of some kind or other. And most of all, it was about your accent. Upper class, middle class, or just plain common. We seldom heard Irish, Scottish, or North Country voice, and almost never a foreign one. In fact, even as late as 1939, when the Polish arrived at the beginning of the Second World War, they might have been inhabitants from another planet. The same applied to visiting or even knowing about other parts of London, especially those on the opposite bank of the Thames. It was a major expedition to travel to the suburbs of those other sides of London, and seldom undertaken. Even places like Mitcham, which wasn't far away at all, Brixton, which was further, Islington, and the East End were so on were spoken of as if to be avoided whenever possible. Quite different from the present time, when it is the in thing to live right in the heart of the city, never mind how derelict or ancient the property. It was, of course, really a crime to be poor, regardless of the cause, and there was no such thing as a benign welfare state to help such unfortunates. There must have been numberless cases of real suffering and starvation. Neither can I recall such events as modern coffee mornings, jumble sales, wine and cheese evenings, barbecues, and so on, which are held now to help so many deserving causes. Doctors, dentists, solicitors, and other professional men were definitely looked up to. Membership of the local golf or cricket clubs was somewhat difficult to obtain, as it was rather a closed shop affair. Most of one's friends' fathers worked in the civil service in London, or the bank, or in some city firm, and there would be a daily stream of them walking to and from the station, since cars were pretty rare. Despite the absence of traffic, though, it was quite unthinkable for children to play out in the street where we lived. I was never allowed to play out in the street, and I was born in the mid to late 60s. Neighbours would then complain if anyone did, and it was socially unacceptable. So we always stayed in the garden, apart from an occasional ride on our scooters or ferry cycles on the pavement outside the house. I wasn't allowed to bike because I wasn't allowed to play outside. Likewise, drinking in public houses were just not done, especially for women and girls. And I was brought up to never drink beer. So a lot of old-fashioned things still occurred in my life. Most homes had whiskey or other spirits and wine in the sideboard cupboard, and for many years the American craze for cocktails was widespread, involving the greatly prized cocktail cabinet, which soon became a must in the furniture in houses. Now, my parents didn't particularly drink. They would have maybe, well, my dad, not really my mum, they would have wine occasionally for special events. My dad, I think, would have shandy or maybe a beer in the summer, or of course if they went out to the countryside, but they didn't have drink really in the house. And funny enough, it speaks here about everyone had to have a cocktail cabinet. Yes, my parents had that because my mother wanted the in thing to make her look socially affluent. So didn't really have drink, but yeah, we had the bar. Swearing as such was non-existent among polite society as compared with today. And such words as blasphemous and so on were so rare as to be blasphemous. Table manners were carefully taught to small children, and it was a matter of personal pride to hold and use one's knife and fork and spoon elegantly, in strong contrast to the present trend of shoveling things into the mouth, so often depicted in television commercials as done by all ages. Yes, I'm appalled at how children these days and older don't even know how to hold a knife and a fork correctly. Please and thank you was certainly heard much more often, and it was customary for a child to write a pleasant thank you letter for any gift received at Christmas or birthday. Yes, I remember all through my childhood, if I wanted to leave the table, I always said, please may I leave the table? And you wouldn't have had books or phones or anything on the table. We were always taught never to take the best or the largest of any item offered, or to put ourselves forward before others. But then this was all before the days of modern psychology, which seemed to me to teach only the pursuit of happiness and self-expression, and never mind who goes under in the process. Now, talking about you always taught never to take the biggest. On this channel, I've read my grandma's autobiography, and one story she has in that is that her brother wanted to stop her being greedy. So he bought this amazing doll, and it was only small, but this amazing expensive doll, and he put it in a box and he wrapped it. And then he put something else in a really huge box and wrapped it all up. And he said to her, you can only have one thing. You choose whichever one, and the other one won't be yours. You can't swap. You can't change your mind. Choose wisely. You can only have one box. And she grabbed the great big box and she unwrapped it. And inside was an old, mouldy potato. And she said, I don't want that. And he said, you chose that. That is yours. And she threw it away. And he said, and look what I've got, because I will have the other one. And he opened it up and showed her the beautiful doll. And she told me much later in life, she never saw that doll again. She still doesn't know what happened to that beautiful doll. She never got it. And she said from that day, she learned her lesson. She has never taken the biggest thing since. And in fact, she always takes the smallest. Okay, carrying on with the story. As regards to fashion, we did tend to be slaves of whatever current trend was in vogue, as for instance, the craze for knitted silk jumpers, ultra-low waist, cloche hats and two-tone shoes, all greatly admired in the 20s. Makeup was quite limited, being mostly a vanishing cream and a dusting of loose powder with a discreet touch of lipstick, but certainly nothing like eyeshadow, mascara, bright nail varnish, hairspray or deodorant. Enamel or gilt solid powder compacts were very popular for a long time, and I can just recall hiding one in my desk while still at school and without being noticed, dabbing it on my shiny face with the minute puff before I went home, no doubt in case I met my current boyfriend on the way. It would, of course, have been confiscated had it come to the notice of my form mistress. In this connection, I must admit that physical beauty as such was greatly admired and cultivated at the time, and it was almost a crime to be what was termed plain or to have straight hair. Hence the enormous popularity of the permanent wave when it was invented. A good skin, large eyes, well-shaped nails, slender ankles, to say nothing of a good figure, all these things added up to, I suppose, one's potential value in the marriage market, as it was assumed that all men preferred these assets rather than such abstract things as talent or personality. All of which leads me to reflect that our sex life was expected to be, and generally was, almost non-existent before marriage, and certainly abortions or illegitimate babies were never heard of in our circle. We certainly had numerous boyfriends, and there was plenty of scope after dances or tennis parties. So perhaps our very innocence and lack of knowledge protected us from disasters. Girls and boys alike seemed to know by instinct the limit to be imposed in any lovemaking, even during the longish engagements, which were normal. Possibly we missed a lot, but it did not seem to worry us. The same approach was true of drugs, pornography, and other things, none of which ever entered our world, so we were unaware of many of the problems such as beset the youth of today. The one thing that was strictly followed up right to the Second World War was the custom of wearing black for long periods of mourning after family bereavements. But this custom died out after the wartime clothes rationing made it quite impossible. If you wonder why in a lot of countries, particularly older people, particularly older women, wear black, it is still for those reasons. Previously, regardless of expense, near relatives were expected to buy complete outfits in black, and the period of full mourning was followed by a period of half mourning when mauve was permissible. I didn't know that. I never heard of that. Black armbands were worn by more distant relations. Wreaths and floral designs for funerals were very elaborate, in great contrast to the simple tributes or donations to charities, which people prefer in the days of cremation and inflationary prices. Almost the biggest change that strikes me now, looking back, is that when I was young, we were always trying to appear and to be grown up, whereas now the trend and cult is to stay young and student life for as long as possible, with no responsibilities. There were no special teenage clothes, so the transition from childhood to maturity was quickly accomplished and something to be looked forward to as soon as school days were over. And I talked about this before, that it was for many years that there really was no teenage clothes necessarily in England unless you were like an older young adult type of clothing, like the 60s clothes, for example. And finally, if you know the shop C&A, they finally opened, I think it was called Clockwork House, which was a branch in C&A for teenage clothing, not just bigger clothes of children's clothes, but actual teenage clothing. There was an increasing tendency for girls as well as boys to think about training for a career, but apart from secretarial work or teaching, there wasn't much scope. Nope, not in my time either. If you had careers, lesson or someone came in to talk about careers, it was basically secretarial, office work, child minding, childcare, not much else. Certainly, it was unthinkable in our circle to even serve in a shop or be a waitress. I wonder if young people today value the complete freedom they now possess in this respect alone. Most girls like myself really had at the back of their minds the ultimate goal of marriage and babies, and any job was more in the nature of providing pin money until then for clothes than a career or to provide a living, since it was out of the question to actually live away from one's home in a flat in the modern style. Yes, very much don't move out until you're married, which my parents lived by. I doubt whether any of the boys I knew would have been able to even boil an egg or make tea in a place of their own, let alone cope with their washing and shopping. We certainly were helpless and spoiled in that sense. No record of the legendary 30s will be complete without some reference to the Great Depression and the tragic unemployment that resulted. But to be honest, I cannot recall that it affected any of my immediate circle of family and friends, nor was I conscious of these events on a national scale. The only thing I do remember vividly was the general strike in 1926, which we all thought rather exciting, though a little bit frightening. But it was soon forgotten once life returned back to normal. The outstanding national event at Christmas for many years was the speech made by King George V on the new wireless, and we all listened in awe silence to this modern miracle which brought the King's gruff voice into our homes. I also recall watching on warm June evenings from the front garden for the royal party to drive past our house in Park Lane on the way back from the Derby and Oaks races near Epsom. Later on, when we had our own family car, we were always taken up to the course to wander round the old-style gypsy caravans which crowded on the downs the night before the race meetings, and we greatly enjoyed the general excitement with all the fun of the fair and having our fortunes told. Old people's homes as such were unknown when I was young, since most grandparents stayed on in their own homes with usually an unmarried daughter to act as a housekeeper when they became too old to cope, or else they went to live with one of their married children and gradually became absorbed into the family life there, as houses were much larger and rooms could more easily be found for an extra person or two. This still occurs in Cyprus. Either the children as adults look after their parents. Often they build an extra story on the house and they do it that way, or they occasionally, if they don't have family left or their family have moved abroad, for example, then they actually get an employee in full time and they drive and take them shopping and whatever else. Another change that has taken place is the difference in the general street scene, because then people wore all proper coats in varying colours and styles according to season, with matching or toning hats. Even my husband, they were still wearing hats when my husband was going to work. In summer, such hats would be very pretty with bunches of shiny artificial cherries or wreaths of poppies and cornflowers added colour and texture to the many types of straw shapes available. Fur coats or trimmings were greatly admired and acted as a sort of status symbol rather than a plain coat. No one gave a thought, though, to the deaths of the animals, and this is one area of modern thought which has greatly changed for the better. I'm thankful to admit, but the contemporary street scene strikes me as terribly dull and boring, with the eternal faded, everyone wearing blue jeans and t-shirts and plimsolls, trainers for all. So not much left of this book. We've got a tiny bit left at the end. That will be one more session. Let me know how you're enjoying the trip back into the past. And thank you for watching very much. I really appreciate it. I'm going to go off now. I'm going to actually video from here. I'm going to do it from here. I'm going to video myself talking about my childhood, and it's going to be a whole series on this channel. I was born in 1964 in England. I'm calling it my 70s childhood memories, but the episode I'm about to recall, I'm going to start with my first memories. So that, of course, will be the 60s. Can't remember a lot, but we'll see how we go. And I'll progress with each episode, going through my childhood. But obviously, some episodes are going to be a roundup of foods I remember of the 70s, or holidays of the 70s, or so on and so forth. So I'm going to go and record that now. And the reason I want to film it rather than just do it as a live is because I want to add pictures in rather than just holding pictures up. So this one's going to include a lot of my baby pictures that I can edit in once I've recorded the video. So I'm going to go and do that. Thank you for watching. I appreciate those who also watch later. And thank you for being here. And I'll see you next time. Bye for now.